My own daughter looked me in the eye and said, "Sleep in the doghouse, you pathetic old man." I'm Edward Hayes, 68 years old, recently divorced, and apparently stupid enough to sign over my $1.2 million house to help my daughter Claire through her rough patch. What happened next will make your blood boil. The moment that deed was in her hands, Claire changed every lock in the house. She packed my belongings like I was some random tenant she was evicting. Then she stood in my driveway, the driveway I'd shoveled for 15 winters, and told me to find somewhere else to sleep. But here's what Claire didn't know. While she was planning my humiliation, I was 3 steps ahead with the best estate attorney in Colorado. Her moment of victory was about to become the most expensive mistake of her life. I hope you'll stick around for this story, and if you do, hit that subscribe button, because I'd love to know where you're watching from. Because what happened next proves that sometimes the quietest revenge is the most devastating. To understand why Claire thought she could treat me like garbage, you need to know where I was 6 months ago. I was a broken man. After 35 years of marriage, I discovered my wife Linda was having an affair with her tennis instructor, a 28-year-old kid named Tyler who drove a BMW I'd unknowingly helped finance. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday. By Friday, Linda had moved in with him. Claire watched me fall apart. She saw me crying in my kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at old photo albums. She heard me on the phone with therapists, scheduling appointments I was too proud to keep. She witnessed me lose 15 pounds in 2 weeks because cooking for one felt pointless. "Dad, you need help," she'd say, but her voice carried something else. Pity. And underneath that, calculation. See, Claire was going through her own divorce from Brian Morrison, a nasty one involving custody battles and asset division. She needed money for legal fees, the kind of money a marketing executive doesn't have lying around. That's when she started visiting more often, bringing takeout, asking about my financial situation, making comments about how big the house felt with just me rattling around inside. "This place is worth over $1 million, Dad. Maybe it's time to downsize. Think about what Mom's lawyer might go after in the settlement." She painted it perfectly. Help her avoid inheritance taxes, protect the family asset from my ex-wife's claims, give her security for her children's future. What she didn't say was what I could see in her eyes every time she looked around. This house, my 4,200 square foot colonial in Cherry Hills Village, wasn't just an inheritance anymore. It was her lottery ticket. The property tax alone was $14,760 per year. The insurance ran another $3,200. Homeowner association fees hit $245 monthly. But Claire only saw the Zillow estimate, $1.23 million. She'd stand in my kitchen looking at the stainless steel Viking range worth $8,500, running her fingers along the granite countertops. She'd walk through my library with its custom mahogany shelving, $15,000 of handcrafted woodwork, and I could practically see the dollar signs in her head. "You don't need all this space, Dad. It's just making you more depressed." But what really convinced her I was an easy target was my reaction to everything. I didn't fight back when Linda took the BMW. I didn't contest her claim to half our savings account. I signed papers without reading them, just to make the pain stop faster. Claire mistook grief for stupidity. She confused temporary vulnerability with permanent weakness. The breaking point came when she brought her lawyer friend Jessica to family dinner. Jessica wasn't there for the pot roast. "Edward, have you considered a strategic asset transfer? With proper estate planning, you could help Claire while protecting yourself from future claims." They had it all figured out. Claire would take ownership. I could live there as long as I wanted. Everyone wins. I played my part perfectly. The confused old man, overwhelmed by legal jargon, grateful for his daughter's concern. "Are you sure this is best for everyone?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Trust me, Dad. I'd never do anything to hurt you." That's what she said. Trust me. So on October 15th, 2024, I signed the deed transfer. Claire Hayes Morrison became the legal owner of 1247 Elmwood Drive. She was practically glowing as we walked out of the notary's office. "You did the right thing, Dad. This protects all of us." I nodded like the grateful, trusting father she thought I was. What I didn't tell her was about the 3-hour meeting I'd had with Samuel Richardson the week before, or the specific type of deed transfer we'd structured, or the paperwork she'd been too excited to read carefully. But I was about to learn that my daughter's gratitude had a very short expiration date. The first sign came just 2 days after the transfer. I was having my morning coffee when Claire walked through the front door without knocking. "Dad, we need to talk about some changes around here." Changes. Like I was a tenant instead of her father. She had a list, printed on her company letterhead, like a business memo. First, the wine cellar. Brian and I are hosting his business partners next month. I'm moving my collection down there. My wine cellar. 500 bottles I'd collected over 20 years. Vintages from our anniversary trips. Bottles Linda and I had planned to open for special occasions that would never come. Second, the master bedroom. It gets the best natural light from my home office setup. You can take the guest room. The guest room, where her grandmother had died 3 years ago. Smaller than my current walk-in closet. Third, utilities and maintenance. Since you're living here, you should contribute to the monthly expenses. I'm thinking $800 seems fair. $800 to live in a house I'd owned for 15 years, to pay for utilities I'd been covering myself since she was in diapers. But it was the way she delivered these demands that really stung. Professional, detached, like she was presenting quarterly targets to her marketing team. I know this seems like a lot of changes, but now that I own the house, we need clear boundaries. Own the house. Those 3 words hit me harder than Linda's affair ever did. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, this woman I'd taught to ride a bike, who'd called me crying at 2 a.m. during her college years, who'd moved back home for 6 months after her first breakup because she needed her daddy. "What if I can't afford $800 a month?" I asked quietly. She shrugged. "Then maybe it's time to look into senior living options. There are some nice places in Denver, more age-appropriate." Age-appropriate. I was 68, not 98. I still jogged 3 miles every morning, still maintained my own yard, still had all my mental faculties, something she was about to discover. But in that moment, I understood what was happening. This wasn't about helping me or protecting family assets. This was about Claire finally getting what she felt she deserved. And if that meant treating her father like an inconvenient roommate, so be it. The stakes were clear now. If I stayed quiet, I'd lose my dignity, my home, and my relationship with my daughter anyway. Just slowly, one humiliation at a time. If I fought back, I'd lose her immediately, but might save what was left of my self-respect. As I sat there, listening to her redesign my life around her convenience, I remembered something my old engineering professor used to say: the strongest structures aren't the ones that never bend. They're the ones that bend exactly as far as they were designed to, and no further. Claire was about to discover I'd reached my limit. The confrontation started over something small. It always does. I was cooking dinner on a Wednesday evening, my famous beef stew, the same recipe I'd made every week for 30 years. Claire walked in with Brian and their 8-year-old son, Tyler. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Making dinner. I made enough for everyone if you'd like to stay." She exchanged a look with Brian, a look that said, "See what I mean?" We already ate. But since we're here, Brian and I need to discuss the renovation plans for the kitchen. Renovation plans for my kitchen, where I was currently cooking. Brian stepped forward, all confidence and expensive cologne. He'd been the one pushing Claire to demand more from me. I could tell by how she'd changed since they started working things out. "Edward, this kitchen layout is incredibly inefficient. The island blocks natural flow. We're thinking of opening it up to the living room, creating more of a modern concept." I stirred my stew, keeping my voice level. "This kitchen has worked fine for 15 years. Worked for someone who doesn't understand optimal space utilization," Claire said. "Brian's architecture degree gives him perspective you might not have." Architecture degree. Brian designed strip mall storefronts. I'd engineered structures that held up skyscrapers. "Where would I cook during this renovation?" I asked. "Well," Claire said, "that's actually something we wanted to discuss. This whole arrangement isn't really working out." Tyler was listening to every word. I saw him glance between his mother and grandfather, confusion written on his face. "What arrangement is that?" You living here, Dad, it's awkward. Brian and I are trying to blend our families, and having you around makes things complicated. Brian nodded supportively. It's nothing personal, Edward. You're a great guy. But Claire and I are building something new here, and we need our space to do that. This is my home, I said quietly. Claire's mask slipped for just a second. I saw the flash of irritation she'd been hiding behind concern. No, Dad, this is my home. You signed the papers, remember? You gave it to me. I gave it to you to help with your divorce, to protect it from creditors. You gave it to me, she repeated, louder now, because you were too overwhelmed to handle adult responsibilities, because you needed me to take care of things. The words hung in the air like smoke. Tyler looked down at his shoes. So, what exactly are you proposing? I asked. Brian cleared his throat. There's a nice senior community about 20 minutes from here. Mountain View Assisted Living. Claire looked into it. They have availability. Assisted living. I was 68 years old, in perfect health, and they were discussing assisted living. I don't need assistance living, I said. Dad, you've been struggling since the divorce. We all see it. Maybe being around people your own age would help. People my own age. I turned off the burner and faced them both. What if I'm not ready to leave? Claire's patience finally snapped. Then you'll be staying somewhere else whether you're ready or not. This is my house now, and I get to decide who lives in it. And if I refuse? Brian stepped closer, trying to look intimidating. Edward, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Claire's being generous by giving you time to make arrangements. How much time? 2 weeks, Claire said. That's plenty of notice. 2 weeks. To abandon the home I'd lived in for 15 years. To walk away from the wine cellar I'd built myself. To leave behind the workshop where I'd taught her to use tools when she was 12. What about my things? Take what you can fit in your car. The rest, she shrugged. Storage unit, maybe? I'm not running a warehouse. I looked at my granddaughter, 8 years old, watching his mother evict his grandfather from his own home, learning that family love comes with conditions and expiration dates. Tyler, I said gently, why don't you go watch TV in the living room? He looked at his mother. She nodded. After he left, I turned back to Claire and Brian. You're really going to do this? Put me out of my own house? It's not your house anymore, Claire said. And honestly, Dad, this victim act is getting old. You made a decision to give me this property. You can't take it back just because you're having second thoughts. That's when Brian made his mistake. He smiled. Look at it this way, Edward. You're 68 years old. How many good years do you have left? Why not spend them somewhere you can be properly cared for instead of rattling around this big house like a ghost? I nodded slowly. I see. Good, Claire said. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Oh, I'm being very reasonable, I replied. I'm just wondering about something. What's that? Did either of you actually read the deed transfer documents before you started planning my eviction? The confident smile froze on Brian's face. What do you mean? I mean, I said, pouring my stew into a bowl, that sometimes the most important details are in the fine print. Claire waved her hand dismissively. Dad, you're not going to scare us with legal technicalities. Jessica reviewed everything. The transfer is ironclad. Jessica, your friend who does corporate compliance law. She's a lawyer. Yes, like a pediatrician is a doctor. Technically accurate, but you wouldn't want her performing heart surgery. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where Claire had done homework 25 years ago, and took a slow bite of my stew. Tell me, Claire, when Jessica was reviewing the paperwork, did she mention the different types of property transfers available? Fee simple, absolute versus life estate with remainder interest? Brian shifted uncomfortably. Edward, we don't need to get bogged down in... Oh, but we do, I interrupted. See, there's a big difference between owning a house and owning the right to inherit a house eventually. Claire's voice got sharper. What are you trying to say? I'm saying that maybe you should have asked more questions before you started measuring my bedroom for your home office. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a photo. This is Samuel Richardson. Ever heard of him? Claire squinted at the screen. Distinguished man in his 60s. standing in front of law books. Should I have? He's the senior partner at Richardson, Walsh and Associates, estate planning specialists. Been practicing for 37 years. I spent quite a bit of time with him before our little deed signing ceremony. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Samuel was very thorough. He explained all my options, the benefits of different transfer structures, the importance of protecting elderly homeowners from, well, let's call them aggressive family members. Brian tried to recover. Look, whatever games you think you're playing. Games? I smiled. Brian, I'm 68 years old. I don't play games anymore. I solve problems. And my problem was how to help my daughter without making myself vulnerable to exactly this conversation. I opened my photos again, this time showing the Richardson Law Firm business card. Samuel was particularly interested when I mentioned that Clare was pushing for a quick transfer. He said that's often a red flag in elder abuse cases. Elder abuse? Claire's voice cracked slightly. Dad, you're being dramatic. Am I? You're demanding I pay rent in my own home. You're planning to renovate without my permission. You're trying to force me into assisted living. What would you call it? I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden I'd maintained for 15 years. You know what Samuel told me? He said the most important thing in any family transfer is maintaining dignity and autonomy for the transferor. Those were his exact words. Transferor, Claire repeated. The person giving the gift. Me. He said too many elderly parents sign away their rights without understanding the protections available to them. Brian was getting agitated. Edward, you can't just undo a legal property transfer because you're having regrets. Who said anything about undoing it? I turned back to face them, my expression calm. The transfer is perfectly legal. You now own this property, Claire. Congratulations. But ownership comes with responsibilities you might not have considered. What responsibilities? Well, for starters, property taxes, $14,760 annually, due in quarterly installments. First payment was due November 1st. Did you budget for that? Claire's face went pale. Then there's insurance. Homeowner's policy runs $3,200 per year. Coverage lapses if payments are 30 days late. The bank gets very unhappy about uninsured collateral. Collateral? Oh, did I forget to mention? There's still $890 remaining on the mortgage. Payments are $6,200 per month, due the 15th. The silence stretched for what felt like an hour. Finally, Brian found his voice. What mortgage? This house was supposed to be paid off. I smiled. It was, but then I took out a home equity line of credit 2 years ago. Seemed like a good investment strategy. The bank was very understanding about keeping my name on all the loan documents, even after the property transfer. Claire's hands were shaking now. You... what? Maybe you should call Jessica. Ask her about assuming debt obligations in property transfers. But wait, I said. There's more. The next morning I woke up to find my house locks changed. Claire had acted fast. New deadbolts, new garage door codes, even the keypad entry was reprogrammed. I discovered this when I returned from my morning jog to find my key no longer worked. I rang the doorbell of my own home. Brian answered, already dressed for work, coffee in hand. Morning, Edward. Claire's getting ready, but she asked me to handle this. Handle what? Your transition out. We've been generous with the timeline, but after last night's outburst, Claire feels it's better to accelerate things. I looked past him into my entryway. Boxes were stacked by the stairs, my belongings hastily packed. You went through my things? Just the essentials. Clothes, medications, important documents. The rest can be dealt with through a moving company. Claire appeared behind him, dressed in her power suit, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, storage unit, rental, climate-controlled if possible. Hold on. She covered the phone. Dad, perfect timing. We're arranging everything for you. I need to get my tools from the basement workshop. Already packed, donated most of it to Habitat for Humanity. You won't need power tools where you're going. Where I'm going. Like I was being deported. What about my files? Tax records, insurance documents? Dad, you don't own property anymore. How complicated can your taxes be? She uncovered her phone. Yes, still here. What's the monthly rate for a 10x10 unit? That's when our neighbor, Nancy Peterson, appeared on her front lawn. Nancy was retired military, ran the neighborhood watch, and had a voice that could stop traffic. Edward, is everything all right? Claire stepped outside, still on her phone call, speaking loudly enough for Nancy to hear. No, Mom, Dad's just being stubborn about the transition. We're trying to help him downsize to something more manageable. More neighbors emerged. The Kowalskis from across the street. The young couple from 2 houses down walking their dog. Even Mrs. Chen from the corner house, ostensibly checking her mailbox, but clearly listening. Perfect. An audience. Claire, I said loudly, could you help me understand something? She ended her phone call. Dad, we really don't need to do this in front of our neighbors? The same neighbors who watched me build the deck behind this house? Who helped me plant those oak trees when you were in high school? Nancy Peterson crossed her arms. She'd been at every one of my backyard barbecues for the past decade. I just want to make sure I understand the new arrangement, I continued. You own the house now. I accept that. But who exactly is responsible for the mortgage payments? Dad? Because Nancy here knows I paid off this house in 2018. She was at the mortgage burning party, remember? But then I took out that home equity loan in 2022 for Linda's medical bills before we knew she was spending time with Tyler, the tennis instructor. Nancy's eyebrows shot up. This was news to her. So the question is, I said, voice carrying across the street, when Claire inherited this property yesterday, did she also inherit the $890,000 debt that comes with it? Claire's face was turning red. Dad, stop! Because the first payment is due in 12 days, November 15th, $6,200. And I'm just wondering, since you changed the locks and all, should I forward the payment coupons to your address, or will you be picking them up from my mail forwarding service? The dog-walking couple had stopped pretending to walk and were openly staring now. Brian tried to intervene. Edward, these are private family matters. Private, I laughed. Brian, you announced to the whole neighborhood that I was being moved into assisted living. Nancy, did you know that Claire thinks I need professional care now? Nancy Peterson, who'd seen me single-handedly repair storm damage to 3 houses last spring, looked incredulous. But here's my real concern, I continued, addressing my audience of neighbors. Claire seems to think that owning this house means she can just evict the previous owner. No notice, no discussion, just change the locks and pack his boxes. Mrs. Chen stepped forward. Edward, are you saying Claire forced you out of your own home? Well, technically it's her home now. She owns it. But I'm curious about something else. I pulled out my phone. Claire, you said Jessica reviewed all the paperwork, right? Dad, please, did Jessica mention anything about life estate provisions? Retained occupancy rights? Beneficiary obligations? The color drained from her face. Because Samuel Richardson, that's my attorney, Nancy, you remember him from the Henderson's estate planning seminar. Samuel was very clear about the legal protections for elderly transfers. I turned back to Claire, especially protections against financial elder abuse. That phrase, elder abuse, hit the neighborhood like a thunderclap. Nancy Peterson's expression went from confused to furious in about 2 seconds. Are you telling me, Nancy said slowly, that Claire convinced you to sign over your house and then immediately evicted you? Now wait, Brian started. Because that, Nancy continued, sounds exactly like the elder abuse cases they talked about at our senior center workshop last month. Claire was trapped. Deny it and look like a liar in front of witnesses. Admit it and confirm what everyone was thinking. It's not abuse, she said weakly. It's family transition. I nodded sympathetically. Of course. And I'm sure when the police arrive to investigate the illegal lockout of a tenant with retained occupancy rights, they'll see it that way too. Police? Claire's voice cracked. Oh, didn't I mention? Nancy, could you call 911? I'd like to report a property dispute. Possible elder abuse situation. I believe the responding officer will want to see the deed paperwork. I smiled at my daughter, especially the parts Jessica didn't read carefully. The police arrived 18 minutes later. Officer Martinez was young, probably early 30s, but he'd clearly handled property disputes before. Sir, can you explain the situation? I handed him my driver's license. I'm Edward Hayes. This is my legal residence. Yesterday, my daughter Claire changed the locks without notice and removed my belongings. Ma'am, he turned to Claire, do you live here? I own this property. I have the deed. May I see it? Claire went inside through the front door I couldn't open and returned with the paperwork. Officer Martinez reviewed it carefully. This shows a property transfer dated October 15th, 2024. Claire Hayes Morrison is listed as the new owner. That's right, Claire said, regaining confidence. My father transferred the house to me. I'm the legal owner now. Mr. Hayes, Officer Martinez said, if you transferred ownership, I'm not sure there's a criminal matter here. This might be a civil dispute. That's when Samuel Richardson's car pulled into my driveway. Samuel Richardson doesn't just arrive places, he makes entrances. 73 years old, silver-haired, wearing a $1,000 suit, carrying a briefcase that's probably worth more than most people's cars. Officer Martinez? He handed over his business card. Samuel Richardson, representing Mr. Hayes. I believe there's been some confusion about the nature of this property transfer. And you are? Estate planning attorney. I prepared the documents your witness is holding. Claire's grip tightened on the deed. He's just my father's lawyer. Actually, Samuel said smoothly, I'm the attorney who saved your father from making a catastrophic legal mistake. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder 3 inches thick. Officer, what Ms. Hayes Morrison is holding is indeed a property deed, but it's not the only document executed during this transaction. Samuel spread papers across the hood of the police car like he was dealing cards. This is the original quitclaim deed Ms. Hayes Morrison requested. Simple transfer, no strings attached. He held up one document. This is what she thought she was getting. Claire leaned forward. That document looked exactly like what she'd watched me sign. But this, Samuel continued, pulling out a different set of papers, is what we actually executed. A life estate deed with remainder interest. Officer Martinez frowned. I'm not familiar with that term. It's quite clever, really. Mr. Hayes transferred ownership of the property to his daughter, exactly as requested. She is indeed the legal owner. Samuel smiled. However, Mr. Hayes retained what we call a life estate. He has the absolute right to occupy this property until his death. The silence was deafening. Think of it like this, Samuel continued, clearly enjoying himself. Ms. Hayes Morrison owns the house, but her father has a lifetime lease that cannot be broken, modified, or terminated by anyone except him. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. That's not... Jessica said... Jessica Patterson from Morrison & Associates? Yes, I spoke with her this morning. Lovely woman. Specializes in corporate compliance law. Unfortunately, she's never handled a residential estate transfer in her career. Samuel pulled out another document. This is the acknowledgement Ms. Hayes Morrison signed, stating she understood the terms of the life estate arrangement. Her signature is right there, witnessed and notarized. I didn't understand. You didn't read, I said quietly. You were too excited about getting the house to actually examine what you were signing. Officer Martinez was trying to keep up. So Mr. Hayes still has the right to live here? More than that, Samuel said. He has the right to exclusive occupancy. Ms. Hayes Morrison cannot enter the property without his permission. She certainly cannot change locks or remove his belongings. Claire looked like she'd been slapped. But I own it. You own a reversionary interest, Samuel corrected. When your father dies, hopefully many years from now, you'll inherit full ownership. Until then, this is his home, and his alone. Brian finally found his voice. This is fraud. He tricked us. Samuel's expression went ice cold. Young man, are you suggesting that an elderly client shouldn't be advised of all available options to protect his interests? Because that would be malpractice. He turned back to Officer Martinez. Mr. Hayes specifically requested a structure that would help his daughter while protecting him from financial abuse. Given yesterday's events, I'd say his concerns were justified. Nancy Peterson, who'd been listening from her yard, called out, What about the mortgage Claire mentioned, the $8,000 to $90,000? Samuel smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Ah, yes, the debt obligation. That's the truly educational part. He pulled out yet another document. This is the mortgage assumption agreement Ms. Hayes Morrison signed. Claire's face went white. The what? When you accepted ownership of encumbered property, you assumed responsibility for all existing liens and obligations. Standard procedure. But nobody told me it's paragraph 12 of the transfer agreement, right above your signature. Officer Martinez looked at the papers. So she's responsible for the mortgage payments? $6,200 per month, Samuel confirmed. First payment due November 15th. Property taxes of $14,960 annually. Insurance premiums of $3,200 per year. All now her responsibility. This can't be legal, Brian protested. It's perfectly legal, Samuel replied. Your girlfriend wanted to own $1 million house. Congratulations, she does. Claire was shaking now. I can't afford $6,200 a month. Then you have two options, Samuel said. Default on the mortgage and face foreclosure, which would be terrible for your credit. Or, he paused for dramatic effect, sell the property back to my client at fair market value minus the outstanding debt. Which would be, I did the math in my head, about $330,000 after paying off the mortgage. Claire stared at me. You planned this. I protected myself, I said simply. You wanted the house. You got the house. You just didn't read the fine print about what comes with it. Officer Martinez closed his notepad. Sir, it sounds like this is a civil matter involving property law. Mr. Hayes appears to have legal right to occupancy. What about my belongings? I asked. Any property removed from the residence should be returned immediately, he said, looking at Claire. Samuel handed Claire a business card. Ms. Hayes Morrison, I suggest you consult with a real estate attorney, not a corporate lawyer, about your options. Quickly. The mortgage payment is due in 11 days. As the officer walked back to his car, I turned to my daughter. Claire, you wanted me out of my house. You got your wish. The question now is whether you can afford to keep it. She looked at the deed in her hands like it was radioactive. How could you do this to me? I helped you, I said. Exactly like you asked. You wanted to own this house. Now you do. I walked to my front door and pulled out my keys. But next time you want to change the locks on my home, you might want to make sure you actually have that right. The next morning, Claire was waiting in my kitchen when I came back from my jog. She'd lost weight overnight. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of her usual perfect styling. The same woman who'd been demanding I pay rent 2 days ago now looked like she'd been crying. Dad, we need to talk. I poured myself a glass of water, took my time answering. I'm listening. I called 4 different banks yesterday. Nobody will refinance the mortgage without a full financial review. My debt-to-income ratio is... She swallowed hard. I can't qualify for payments this size. I see. The first payment is due in 9 days. If I miss it, there's a 10-day grace period, but then... She pulled out a stack of papers. Samuel's right. They can start foreclosure proceedings. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table, the same spot where she used to do homework while I cooked dinner, before she grew up and decided I was an inconvenience. What are you asking me, Claire? I need help. What kind of help? Her hands were shaking. I need you to take the house back. I sipped my water slowly. I don't own a house anymore, remember? You do. Dad, please. I made a mistake. What mistake was that? She closed her eyes. Thinking I could kick you out of your own home? Thinking you could treat me like garbage and face no consequences, I corrected. Yes, that too. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. 42 years old, successful marketing executive, reduced to begging her father for help with a mess entirely of her own creation. Tell me about the mortgage payment, I said. $6,200 on November 15th, then every month after that. And you can't afford it? I make $89,000 a year, after taxes, insurance, my own rent, car payment, Tyler's expenses. She shook her head. Maybe $2,800 a month maximum, and that's cutting everything. What about Brian? Brian's not putting his name on anything financial with me. We're not married. Her voice turned bitter. Turns out he's much more interested in my potential inheritance than helping with my actual debts. Smart man. Dad, I'll sure. I'm serious. He saw you inherit $1 million house and figured he'd found his meal ticket. Now that meal ticket comes with a $6,200 monthly payment he wants nothing to do with. She winced but didn't argue. What about your mother? Mom's new husband isn't interested in helping his wife's ex-family with property investments. I nodded. So you're alone with this? Yes. Like you wanted me to be. She had the grace to look ashamed. Yes. I walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the yard I'd been maintaining for 15 years, the oak trees I'd planted when Claire was in college, the flower beds I'd designed with Linda back when we were happy. Claire, do you remember when you were 16 and you totaled your car? Dad, this isn't the same. You'd been drinking at Jessica Morrison's party, drove into a ditch on your way home. Her face flushed. I remember. You called me at 2 a.m., crying, terrified. You begged me not to tell your mother. Said you'd do anything if I'd just fix it. You helped me. I did. Paid for the repairs, covered the insurance deductible, told your mother you hit black ice. Why are you bringing this up? Because the next week, when I asked you to help me clean the garage, you told me you were too busy. When I asked you to wash dishes, you complained I was treating you like a servant. Claire was quiet. You took my help, then immediately went back to taking me for granted. Same pattern your whole life. Crisis hits, you need Dad. Crisis passes, Dad becomes invisible again. It's exactly what happened here. Your divorce gets messy. Suddenly you're visiting every week, bringing takeout, being the concerned daughter. I sign over the house, and 2 days later, you're changing my locks. I turn back to face her. So here's my question, Claire. Why should I believe this time is different? Because I understand now. Understand what? That I almost lost you. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. When I saw you standing there yesterday, when the police were involved, when I realized what I'd done, her voice cracked. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there were consequences. But are you sorry you tried to throw me out of my own home? Yes. Are you sorry you called me a pathetic old man? Yes. Are you sorry you told me to sleep in the doghouse like an animal? She flinched. God, yes. Dad, I was horrible to you. I sat back down across from her. Tell me about the property taxes. What? $14,760 annually. When are they due? She pulled out more papers from her stack. Quarterly payments. First one was due November 1st. Did you pay it? No, I didn't know I was supposed to. It's been 20 days. There's already a late penalty accumulating. Her face went paler. How much? Probably around $400 by now, plus interest. I don't have $400. I pulled out my phone and showed her a banking app. I do. Hope flickered in her eyes. I could pay the property taxes, I continued. I could make the mortgage payment. I could handle the insurance premiums. Would you? Under certain conditions. What conditions? I leaned back in my chair. First, you apologized to Tyler. You let an 8-year-old watch you evict his grandfather. That was cruel. Okay? Second, you apologized to Nancy Peterson and the neighbors. You embarrassed yourself and me with that public spectacle. Okay? Third, Brian is no longer welcome in this house. Dad, he encouraged you to throw me out. He called me a ghost rattling around my own home. He's not family, and he's not my friend. She hesitated, then nodded. Fourth, we established clear boundaries. This is my home. I make the rules about maintenance, renovations, guests, and household management. You're welcome to visit, but you don't live here. What about the deed? I still own the property. I smiled. Claire, you own a piece of paper that says you inherit this house when I die. Until then, you own a debt obligation you can't afford. So what are you proposing? I'll handle all the expenses. Property taxes, mortgage, insurance, maintenance. In exchange, you stop trying to control my life. That's incredibly generous. It's practical. You can't afford to keep this house, but you can't afford to lose it either. Foreclosure would destroy your credit. She was crying now. Why would you help me after what I did? Because you're my daughter, and because I want Tyler to grow up seeing how families should treat each other. With respect. With respect. She wiped her eyes again. What if I mess up again? Then you'll deal with the consequences again. But this time you'll deal with them knowing that respect isn't optional. I pulled out Samuel Richardson's business card. Call him this afternoon. Tell him you want to discuss a management agreement for the property. He'll draw up something that protects both of us. Will you pay the mortgage payment? I'll transfer the money this afternoon. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. Dad? Yes? I love you. I love you too, Claire. But love without respect isn't enough anymore. She nodded. I understand. Good. Now your first demonstration of that understanding. There are boxes of my belongings in the garage. I want them unpacked and returned to their proper places by this evening. Of course. And Claire? Yes? Next time you want to inherit something, maybe read the paperwork first. For the first time in days, she almost smiled. Word travels fast in Cherry Hills Village. By the end of the week, everyone knew the story. Edward Hayes had outmaneuvered his own daughter. The daughter who'd tried to evict her father from his home had ended up begging him for financial rescue. But the real consequences were just beginning to unfold. Claire's relationship with Brian imploded within 48 hours. Once he realized she owned a house with massive debt obligations, instead of $1 million asset, his interest evaporated completely. I thought we were building something together, Claire told me over coffee. Turns out he was building something with my potential inheritance. Better to find out now than after a wedding. He actually suggested I file for bankruptcy to get out of the mortgage debt. Said we could start fresh somewhere else. I shook my head. A man who encourages you to destroy your credit and abandon your responsibilities isn't someone you want to build a life with. She stirred her coffee absently. I wasted 2 years on him. You learned something valuable. That's not wasted time. The professional consequences were more subtle but equally damaging. Claire's company, a prestigious marketing firm downtown, prided itself on hiring ethical professionals with strong judgment. When details of the elder abuse incident reached her boss through neighborhood connections, Denver's professional community is smaller than people think, Claire found herself in an uncomfortable meeting with HR. They didn't fire me, she explained, but they made it clear that my family situation reflected poorly on my decision-making capabilities. What does that mean practically? No promotion this year, probably not next year either. The senior partner said I needed to rebuild confidence in my professional judgment. She'd lost her boyfriend and her career trajectory in the same week. But the financial pressure was relentless. Even with me covering the house expenses, Claire was struggling. The emotional stress had affected her work performance. She'd missed 2 client presentations while dealing with lawyers and bank calls. I might need to take a second job, she admitted. Weekend retail, maybe tutoring. What about Tyler? That's the worst part. He's been asking why Mommy seems sad all the time. Why Brian doesn't come around anymore. Why Grandpa was sleeping in hotels. I looked at my grandson playing in the living room, building something with Legos. What have you told him? The truth, age-appropriately, that Mommy made some bad choices and hurt Grandpa's feelings, that we're working to fix things. How's he handling it? Better than I am. Kids are resilient. She paused. He asked if you were going to live here forever now. What did you say? I said I hope so. 2 weeks later, Jessica Patterson called Claire with more uncomfortable news. Jessica heard about the life estate deed through legal circles, Claire explained. Apparently, Samuel Richardson has been using our case as an example in his elder law seminars. An example of what? How to protect elderly clients from financial abuse by family members. I'm apparently a cautionary tale now. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Nancy Peterson had become something of a neighborhood advocate for elderly rights after witnessing our confrontation. She'd organized a seminar at the community center about estate planning and elder protection. Nancy asked if you'd be willing to speak, Claire said. Share your story about the life estate structure. What would I tell people? How to protect themselves. How to help their children without making themselves vulnerable. I considered it. That might be useful. There's something else, Claire said quietly. What's that? 3 different neighbors have approached me, all dealing with similar situations. Adult children pressuring elderly parents to sign over property or assets. Like what? Mrs. Patterson's son wants her to move in with him and rent out her house. The Kowalski's daughter is pushing them to sell and downsize to a retirement community. The Chens are being pressured to add their son's name to all their accounts. I frowned. Those could be legitimate family planning conversations. Or they could be financial abuse. Nancy thinks we should help people understand the difference. That afternoon, Tyler approached me while I was working in my garden. Grandpa? Yes, buddy. Is Mommy in trouble? I set down my pruning shears and gave him my full attention. What kind of trouble? She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm not looking, and Brian doesn't come over anymore. I chose my words carefully. Your mom made some mistakes, Tyler. She hurt my feelings and made some bad choices. But she's not in trouble. She's learning. Learning what? How to be a better person. How to treat people with respect, especially family. He thought about this seriously. Are you still mad at her? I was never mad exactly. I was disappointed. What's the difference? Mad is when someone does something bad and you want to hurt them back. Disappointed is when someone you love does something bad and you want to help them do better. Tyler nodded solemnly. I get disappointed when my friends are mean to other kids. Exactly like that. So you still love Mommy? Of course I do. Love doesn't stop just because someone makes mistakes. But you made her say sorry. Yes, I did. Good. She was being mean to you. That evening, Claire found me reading in my library. Dad? Yes? Tyler told me about your conversation today. I tried to be age-appropriate. You were perfect. She sat down across from me. He said you told him that love doesn't stop because of mistakes. It's true. I'm lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other. But Claire? Yes? Luck requires maintenance. Relationships require effort and respect. I understand. Good. Because I've been thinking about Nancy's idea. The elder protection seminars. You want to do it? I want us to do it. Together. She looked surprised. Both of us? You can explain what it feels like to get caught up in financial pressure and make bad decisions. I can explain how to protect yourself without ending relationships. You think people would listen to me? After what I did? I think people would relate to you. Everyone makes mistakes under pressure. Not everyone learns from them. She was quiet for a long moment. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were setting up the life estate deed, did you know I would try to evict you? I closed my book and looked at her honestly. I hoped you wouldn't, but I prepared for the possibility that you might. That's so sad. No, I said gently. That's smart. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. That's how you build structures that last. She smiled, like a good engineer, like a good father. 6 months later, Claire and I were finishing our third Elder Protection Seminar at the Cherry Hills Community Center. 35 people attended this time. Elderly couples worried about financial pressure from adult children, middle-aged adults concerned about aging parents, even some younger families learning about estate planning. The most important thing, I told the audience, is communication before crisis. Don't wait until someone's desperate to have these conversations. Claire stepped forward. And for the adult children in the room, remember that your parents' assets aren't your inheritance until they decide to make them your inheritance. An elderly woman in the front row raised her hand. What if my son says, I'm too old to manage my own finances? Then ask him to prove it, I replied. If there are legitimate concerns about capacity, there are proper legal channels. But wanting someone else's money isn't grounds for declaring them incompetent. After the seminar, Nancy Peterson approached us. You two have become quite a team, Claire smiled. We're learning. Any regrets about how everything worked out? Nancy asked me. I considered the question. I regret that it took a crisis for us to establish proper boundaries, but I don't regret protecting myself. What about you, Claire? I regret everything about my behavior last fall, but I'm grateful it happened before I did permanent damage to our relationship. That evening, Tyler was staying overnight, a regular Friday tradition we'd established. Grandpa, tell me the story about the house again. Which part? The part where you outsmarted Mommy. I didn't outsmart her, buddy. I protected myself when she wasn't thinking clearly. But you had a secret plan. I had professional advice from a good attorney. That's different than a secret plan. Oh, he looked slightly disappointed. Tyler, what's the most important part of the whole story? He thought seriously. That you still love Mommy even though she was mean? That's one important part. What else? That you didn't get revenge. You just made things fair. Exactly. Revenge is when you try to hurt someone back. Consequences are when actions have natural results. And now Mommy treats you with respect? She does, and I treat her with respect too. And you both live happily ever after? I smiled. We both live respectfully ever after, which is better than happily ever after, because it's more honest. Claire joined us for Tyler's bedtime story, curling up in the chair she'd claimed when she was his age. Afterward, as Tyler slept and Claire gathered her things to go home to her apartment, she paused at the front door. Dad? Yes? Thank you. For what? For teaching me that love with boundaries is stronger than love without them. I hugged my daughter good night. Sweet dreams, Claire. See you Sunday for dinner. Wouldn't miss it. She walked to her car, and I watched until her taillights disappeared down the street. Then I went back inside my home, and locked the door. The locks I controlled. If you've been through something similar with your own family, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes the people who love us most need to learn that love and respect go hand in hand. And remember, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. But also remember that people can change when they face real consequences for their actions. What would you have done in my situation?